Hello and welcome back to Taking Back Saturday, a Happy Buyers Club podcast where we break down the real estate market each and every other Friday and help buyers build confidence, follow a process, and hopefully buy really well. I'm your host, Chayse Jones, and joining me after a little break, father of two and father of real estate, Sam Hunter. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I just said to you that I haven't had a coffee yet today, so we could be on for anything.
That's okay. We'll hit pause and we'll be back in 5 minutes, guys.
Have a nap and away we go.
Nice one. For most people, real estate and the journey to finding a house is generally not straightforward. It's not always smooth sailing. It's probably very rare that people jump in and buy something on the first weekend that ticks every box and is an absolute perfect house. Reality being is that it's a pretty rocky road for most people. And it's something that we encounter both with clients and non-clients and a lot of people that we speak to. So we thought that maybe today's episode would cover off on that journey of like what it looks like maybe starting out and what it looks like in those early days and what it can sometimes look like months down the track.
For sure. There you go. We haven't done this for a while. I was going to say that there's like 2 or 3 types of people that we see every weekend, and you get your very almost like first time lookers, not necessarily first time buyers.
Yeah,
and they're excited. Open homes are fun. They're this like almost ethereal thing that we went to open homes on the weekend, and they're bragging to their colleagues and their friends and their family about it because they're ready to get into the market, and they probably haven't missed anything, and they've been thinking about real estate for a long time. And real estate is pretty fun to think about until you're in it. So we see plenty of those, and they're pretty easy to spot, I reckon.
They're asking a lot of questions.
For sure. I think they're just surface level lookers. So they're seeing if their kitchens and bathrooms look nice. Do they like the tiles? Does the deck work for them? Could they see themselves living there? They're not really in the nitty gritty of it. And there's plenty of those every single week. There's the people who we see for a period of time going to the same sort of open homes in the same sort of areas, and you give each other the polite smile and the look. It's like, hey, see you guys, see you in the next one. And they're starting to get pretty serious about what they're looking for. Some of them have really early success, and some of them are just on the journey to find their perfect property. I think everybody starts looking for perfection, and it's important to recognize perfection doesn't really exist in real estate. And then you get the third type of people, which are the people that are coming up to you while you're recording a video or talking to us as we're just about to jump in the car, being like, are you guys buyers agents? What did you think of that place? What do you do? And like, do you know anything more about this than we don't? Because we've been looking for a really long time and have either missed out or just haven't found perfection and have been unwilling to compromise. And I think there's a lot of people in this market, and this podcast probably will date within the next maybe 6 to 12 months, but who knows? There's a lot of people in this market now, sort of winter 2024 here in Brisbane, that are buying property for the sake of buying property and are perhaps compromising on the stuff that they said they never would because they're just sick of missing out. And they literally are sick of giving up their Saturdays. Their colleagues are like, what are you up to on the weekend? The last thing they want to tell them is,
they've gone full circle.
We're going over
from once bragging to now being like, don't tell people that we're doing this for the 6th straight month of weekends.
It starts to feel like for a lot of people that they're doing something wrong. And that's, an indictment of the real estate process, I think, particularly in a market where prices are going one way and there's still not that many houses for people to choose from. So we thought we would have a chat for hopefully 15 or 20 minutes about how you can avoid not necessarily buying the wrong house. Like we talk to our clients all the time about, like, it is about the right property. It's not about the perfect property.
Correct.
It's not about the cheapest property. We will do everything we possibly can, and we will take as long as we need to find you the right property. Because a lot of people end up buying the wrong property, or a lot of people end up just going, oh, that's cheap, we'll buy it. And they've compromised on something that will mean that property, even in a rising market, will always remain cheap. And they may not get the market working as hard for them as something else that maybe they only have to wait another 2 weeks or 3 weeks, or perhaps something else that they should have bought and paid $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 more for.
Yeah, and there's two things you spoke to right there that we are constantly talking to, throughout the process with our buyers, is compromise. It is the reality of real estate, but it's about what we compromise on. And the other thing is real estate fundamentals, because there are some things that we recommend we never compromise on. And it is just to that. It speaks to not only your time in that house, but when you do come to the end of your time in that property, is there going to be another buyer that can see past that very big compromise that you were willing to take on when you bought? So when we speak about compromise, and I think that sort of the starting point of compromise is with must-haves. We sit down with our clients well ahead of time and start to nut out, what are we looking for? But also within that, what are the must-haves? These are the non-negotiables that we are going to basically build the foundation of your search from. Those are things that we speak to agents about. These are our must-haves. We'll keep a fairly open mind, to other things. Yeah, and it means that more opportunities come to us, and that's on us to then filter those down and sort of work out, what is appropriate and what's not. But those must-haves, and examples being, no flood risk, no main roads, aspect. There's plenty of things, and it's different for every person and everyone's situation. But having those must-haves in place is really important to start with, but then it's also good to revisit them along the journey, I think, as well.
There's a lot of people who end up, whether they feel like it or they are, but they end up wasting time because they go and look at everything. So they might decide that they want to buy a property in Barton, right? And they'll go and look at everything on the market in Barton, whether it's in their price range or it ticks their must-haves. Let's say they wanted a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom home on a minimum 405, and they've got 1.6 to 1.7 to spend. They'll go and look at $2 million homes.
Yep.
They'll go and look at shit boxes.
They'll look at 5-bedders. They'll look at everything.
They'll go and look at the work, the properties that have work to be done that they don't want to do, because they're like, well, if maybe we could buy that for 1.3, and then we'd go into the work with no intention of ever doing it. And they waste a lot of time, and it confuses what they're really looking for. So if we're having a conversation about, and this is to the buyers who buying a house feels like a full-time job, you're sick of talking about it, you're sick of going to open homes, you're sick of talking to real estate agents, how do you avoid buying a wrong house, or how do you avoid buying any property just to get in the market and get out of the Saturday open home race? It's how do you communicate between yourself and your buying partner about what is really important to you? 6 months ago, you talked about what you wanted. It was a 3-bedroom, 1 or 2 bathroom house in Barton. Let's use that as an example.
Yep.
Up to a certain price. 6 months later, is that really what you want? Is that still what you guys are looking for? How do you, when you see a property come on realestate.com and you get that alert saying new properties are available in the suburbs that you're looking for with your saved search, how do you flip through that on a Wednesday night where you're watching MasterChef and say, that still ticks our non-negs, I want to go and have a look at that? Versus, I've picked out all ththese houses for us to just go and traipse around in and waste fuel and go and buy a couple of coffees on a Saturday morning.
And create exhaustion in your search.
100%.
Because that's a surefire way to feel defeated at the end of a Saturday, because you've seen 7 things that didn't even come close to those Wednesday night conversations.
And you also don't get a sense of values and where they are, which means that as and when something does tick those boxes, you're not sure what you should pay. And time kills deals. Particularly in this market where actually less we're finding is going to auction and more stuff's being sold on the first or second open.
Yeah.
So keep referring, keep communicating back. It's like good real estate fundamentals are like good relationship fundamentals. Keep talking to each other. What's important to you is still important to me. Do any of these need to change? Are we willing to sacrifice one of our non-negotiables? Do we have to live apart? Do we need 2 bathrooms? Are we prepared to do some work? Could we, and we'll talk about this, but is 1.6 to 1.7 our budget? Could we get to 1.85? Because that opens up a whole, particularly, not that we're talking about real search, but particularly somewhere like Barton, like going from 1.6 to 1.8 opens up bedrooms, bathrooms, car spaces, pools, all that sort of stuff, right? So can you have these conversations? For us, when we sit down with a new client, and let's say they've been looking for 4 or 5 months and it is a full-time job and they are feeling a bit defeated, they haven't had this conversation since the first week.
Definitely. And we sit down with them and give them that clarity again. We almost like run an exercise where it's like, hey, this is what has happened whilst you've been looking. Had you been in a position with time, energy, luck, whatever it may be. Would you have bought this property? Would you have bought this property? Would you have bought this property? And you can see it in their mind. They're like, okay, what I'm looking for either does exist or doesn't exist, or is it a feasibility thing? Is it something to do with, something we can't compromise sometimes, which is money, or something we might touch on moving forward. But it is about clarity. It's about clarity with each other about what is it that we're actually looking for, clarity on how we're spending our time on a Saturday. If you're only going to see 1 or 2 properties on a Saturday, as long as they are box tickers, that's a Saturday well spent. 100%. And that was going to help you then in the Wednesday conversation again, when you're like, okay, what was it about those that didn't quite work? And are these ones on Saturday we can compare back to previous Saturdays? But all of a sudden you're in that market. You're not looking at everything to the point where how could you keep track of it? It does become a full-time job. But having clarity, going to see places that are appropriate, comparing to those is the best way.
For sure. One of my favorite sayings, and Chayse will test this, and I say this more than I should, is slow down to speed up. And there is an element of, we've got to pack in so many open homes into our Saturdays. Like, we've got to get there early, spend 5 minutes, take a video, get to the next one. If you're already seeing 2 and they tick all your boxes, that's a really productive Saturday. And if they don't work for you, because you've only seen those 2 and you've had the opportunity to discuss it, you can give great feedback to that agent. Definitely. You can say, it ticked all the non-negotiable boxes, but here's why we don't think it was the one for us. And giving that feedback to them probably earns you the right to get the phone call when one comes up that still ticks those boxes, but maybe has 1 or 2 of the compromises unticked.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm going.
I appraised one on Tuesday that actually sounds a bit like that.
Had the better aspect. The tree from the neighbor wasn't in that backyard.
Can I call you about on Tuesday?
Yeah, 100%. And so, keeping it to what you actually want instead of going out and looking at everything and anything gives you, like, if you're looking for that 3-bedroom house on the north side and you go and look at a 5-bedroom property for $2.5 million and you say, oh no, we were just browsing, can't buy it. That agent is not going to have, probably in this market, the time to, let's give them some credit. They will not have the time to focus on you and help you at the moment, because they will have probably 3 people who are reasonably interested in that property. But then a load of other people who just came through, they still want to go and make sure that they've shaken the tree to see if they're interested or they have something that they might want to sell themselves or anything like that. So it's not doing you any favors widening the gap just to spend more time at open homes. Like, figure out and communicate what you really want and just go and look at that.
Almost better to identify, the type of properties that you're after, the agents that are selling those types of properties, and then you're identifying yourself to them as the best buyer 100%. In their market.
Yep.
And there might only be, let's say that in any one area, we'll keep using Barton as an example, Barton and surrounding suburbs, there might only be maybe 200 agents that have sold properties there in the last 2 years. But of those, maybe 10 to 20 of them have sold 90% of them. Yeah, particularly stuff that you're after. Identifying yourself to them, giving them feedback is going to mean that they will look to you as a great buyer for the next one up, the one that I'm appraising during the week. Maybe you could help them win that listing based on you're a locked and loaded buyer that's looking for the house that they're looking to potentially list. So that's the kind of stuff that we do. And it's not impossible for your average person to do that as well. It's about using your time effectively. And it's about good communication with the right agents on the right properties.
I think the reason why buyer's agents exist is because it is our job to make those phone calls, to establish those relationships, and to weasel our way into photo shoots and listing appointments where the run-of-the-mill buyer, one, probably doesn't know that they can ask those questions, but 2, doesn't want to have those interactions. And in this market, if you're serious about buying a house, and again, the right house for the right price, no such thing as cheap real estate, but just getting that almost perfect property, shall we say, you've got to be on the front foot. You've got to have those conversations, identify those 10 agents. If that agent calls you back on a Saturday afternoon, you call them back on Monday and you say, hey, thanks heaps. I gave you the feedback, gave the price for it. It wasn't for us, but this is what I'm looking for. What have you got? Your point of, can I come to some photos? What a great way. Can I, if you get the building pass before it goes to auction, can I come along? We're going to a building inspection today because it's a great house. It's going to auction and we want to be the only buyers with the context to what that report says. We don't just want the report. We want to know what the guy thought about it before he put in
100%.
His liability comments.
Yeah, exactly.
And that will position us as the buyer that can make the best decision. Whether we're going to pay the most money or not, we'll find out on the day, but we will be in the best position to make the best decision. So yeah, your point about keeping in touch with the good agents, I don't think can be understated. I think the last point that I'd make to avoid that trap of just buying something because you feel like you have to is, you mentioned before, sometimes money is the non-negotiable or the piece you can't compromise on. If you've been looking for 4 or 5 months, chances are you had a pre-approval at the start and you're really excited. We got 90 days, let's go and buy a house. Sweet. Maybe it's expired. Maybe you've got it again. Who knows? I can't recommend getting another opinion on your borrowing power enough. We have seen it in the past where it makes the difference of $50,000 or $60,000, and the product might actually mean that the repayments are the same, but you can afford more because there's a little bit shaved off the product because of your circumstances. And maybe you've got a high deposit because you haven't bought in 4 months. Maybe not, because life's pretty expensive at the moment. Having a second opinion, just running those numbers, doesn't mean you have to switch to a new bank, switch to a new mortgage broker, but it just gives you confidence that this is actually what we're playing with. And this money is real. This budget is real. It's now confirmed by somebody else who's trying their absolute best to get us the best. And so we know. Or best case scenario, suddenly you've got a little bit more money, which means maybe you can go and find that second bathroom. Or maybe you can buy a better house on a smaller block or a worse house in a bigger block. Again, it's going to be dependent on your circumstances, but more times than I can count on both my hands, we've found $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 extra for people, and it's made the difference.
Can make an enormous difference, because it's the difference of just missing out to being the best buyer
100%.
who has the budget to take that away from the market. 100%. I think that's a really great way to think about that part of compromise, because like we said, there's certain things that we want people to speak about constantly about. Are these must-haves still must-haves? Are we willing to compromise on location? Are we willing to compromise on the product itself? And the last one is typically money. And it's a difficult one for people to compromise on. But even if it is just a second opinion, to just squeeze out just that little bit of extra buying power makes all the difference.
Particularly, again, to date this podcast even more, we're all getting a tax break in 2 weeks. That's going to change the borrowing capacity for most buyers in this market, like by about $50,000. So if you're earning between 100 and 150 grand a year, I think you get like $5,000 back over the course of a year, which is not pennies, it's not a great deal of money either. But you compound that over a 30-year payback period in a mortgage, and it works out to be something like 50 grand that you're able to buy. As you just said, if you've run those numbers and every other buyer at an auction or everyone in the best and the finals haven't, then suddenly you've got a little bit more in a war chest. And yet, spending more money does cost you more money in your repayments. But if it's the sake of, $50 a week, which I think is about 50 grand a year in terms of repayments, to buy the house that you really want versus missing out and then compromising and buying that main road, it'll be like, we'll just take the flood risk because it's cheap. That's a better real estate decision. So if, unless you're earning 250 grand, you're not getting much this year. If you're earning less than that, call your mortgage broker, get a second opinion, run your numbers again, and make sure that you're in a position to buy what you want, because there will be another one.
Yeah.
You just need to be in a position to buy it.
Yeah. Be ready, be prepared, have done the work ahead of time. Always just keep talking about it. We can't reiterate that enough. It is all about communication and having the conversations before you're there at the open or standing out the front by your car. Sort of have prepared yourself so that when that right opportunity does come about, which it will, that ticks the boxes, that's not compromising a great deal and it's within your budget, that you can move quickly. Because what we're finding in the current market is that those box ticking properties, which for a lot of people are quite similar in a lot of different areas, for a lot of similar families and exhausted buyers who are trying to get into the spots they want to be, that when the right properties are appearing, those that are prepared are taking them away from the market.
For sure. They get an offer Saturday afternoon, everyone's getting the call or the text message being like, hey, if you want to make an offer, I need to know today, or I need to know by, I think there was one from the weekend that we turned it back on that was 10 a.m. Tuesday. So it is, if you're not prepared, if you don't understand, if you're not sure what you want and whether you can afford it, you're going to be scrambling, and no one makes good decisions when they're scrambling.
No, absolutely not. And yeah, that's the warning, guys. Is things move quickly. So as long as you can reconcile with that, take the call on the Saturday afternoon. Answer that call. You can't kick stones come Monday if you find out that the property's sold, because things are moving, and you got to be there with it. He's Sam. I'm Chase.
Thanks for having me.
Cue the song. Let's get out of here.